I need a little more help than Todd does. Well, good evening. We're going to be in the book of Proverbs tonight. We're going to start a new series of lessons during our Sunday evening services for, I don't know how many weeks. Right now, in my mind, it's about 10 or 11, but we'll play it by ear, so I don't know. We'll just see how it goes. We are not going to do just a straight-through, extensive study of the book of Proverbs. It would take a lot more than 10 or 11 weeks. What we're going to do is introduce it tonight and then look at some of the topics that are addressed within the book, some topics that are part of everyday life, and search out the wisdom that are in these topics. Just some examples. We're going to think about adversity, friendship, quarreling, envy, pride, speech, wealth, security. These are just ordinary life, things that we deal with in everyday life, and we're going to be searching for reliable guidance in these areas from the book of wisdom, the book of Proverbs. Tonight, we're going to look at the topic of wisdom. We're really going to spend time in chapters 1 and 2. Again, not all the way through it. We're going to just look at a portion of chapters 1 and 2 that get us oriented to the book of Proverbs, to this study, and introduce us to the topic of wisdom. And we're going to think about taking the right path. I saw this picture a while back when I first started thinking about this series. Don't trust your apps. What that's talking about is your GPS apps. You've probably, I've talked before about my struggle with GPS. Sometimes I don't listen to it when I should. I think I know better and I go my own way. But what this is referring to is sometimes people rely on it too much. And there's been some pretty tragic accidents where people following their GPS device have driven straight off a bridge and lost their life in the process. And so they put these signs up, don't trust your apps. Okay? You use them, but you don't want to rely on them too much. And I think we have, just as human beings, we tend sometimes to have default navigation that we may not even be aware of, that we're being navigated by, things that are directing us, and we don't even realize it. Some of it's outside influence, our culture, the values, the beliefs of our culture, what the crowds are doing, the pressure of that. We can just be conforming to it, not even realize we're being navigated by what is happening in culture around us. But a lot of times it's inside. It's what I feel, my desires, my fears. They're navigating me. I don't even realize that's why I'm doing this or that, but it's because of something inside me that may not be wise. It's just what I feel like. It's what I want, or it's what I'm afraid of, and so it's steering my life. So I think we're going to start here by just saying, don't trust your apps, those default navigation things, the things that you need more reliable guidance than the surrounding culture or those internal feelings. So that is the subject of wisdom. We're going to look at this under 4 headings tonight. Don't panic. We're not going to give each of those 4 headings the same amount of attention. So I don't want everyone's blood pressure to go up. Let's focus first on the first 7 verses of chapter 1. Proverbs 1 through 7. This is the prologue. This is the clearest purpose statement of any book in the Bible. I don't think there's any book in the Bible that gives a clearer purpose statement right from the start about what this book is for. So Proverbs 1, verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Okay, just stop right there and notice that we're introduced to the author, Solomon. We learn in 1 Kings, God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure and breadth of mind like the sand of the seashore. He's got this God-given wisdom. And we learn also that he spoke 3,000 proverbs and his songs were 1,005. So good reason to understand that a good bulk of the proverbs in this book come from Solomon in his wisdom. There are other authors in the book that are noted, as we'll see. But it's all in the line of what you might call Solomonic wisdom. The Proverbs of. Proverbs, what is that? We just read that real quickly. What's a proverb? The word has to do with any kind of saying that has a level of complexity to it. It's a saying, short or long, that makes you think, causes you to think. That's what a proverb is. That includes what we would call traditional one-verse proverbs, those little, just one-verse, complex saying that make you think. It includes that, but it's more broadly would be considered parables or poems. They're a level of complexity to them that make you dig and make you think. And so all of this is a study of those kinds of things. Now we see the purpose. Let me back up there. Verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity. So the purpose of the book is for teaching and learning. And it's almost like a syllabus. If you've taken a college class and you get a syllabus and you read in there your course objectives. This is the objective of the course, to know wisdom and instruction. Now, if we just take what that word wisdom has to do with, it's more practical than what we tend to think. To know wisdom, it's just know-how, skill, expertise. You're going to learn some expertise, some skill, some know-how for life. Instruction can be like directions. When you get something that comes with instructions, with directions how to do this, but it also has to do with discipline or training. So that's what we're getting to know in this book. I love the line there, to understand words of insight. It has to do with perception, discerning. I was visiting with Kerrigan the other day. We were talking about her school, and she said something I've heard before, but it was interesting hearing a young woman say it. She said at her school, they're teaching us how to think, not just what to think. That's really good. It's really important. That's what this has to do with. This is not just relaying facts. It's teaching you how to think, how to be discerning, how to understand, not just the bare facts, here's the info you need, but here's the way to develop a discerning mind, to be able to grasp things and understand them. And what we're going to be receiving as students in this learning book is a particular kind of instruction. It's practical. It gets into the everyday life. Here's some things you ought to do, some know-how to it. But it's also moral. You notice there in righteousness, justice, and equity. The NIV puts it, what is right, just, and fair. So not only are we dealing with sort of how-to practical things, but there's a moral element, not just what is a good way to live, but what is a right way to live? What is the morally upright thing to do? Now, if we're going to take all of that and put it into one word, it's wisdom. Wisdom's got a specific meaning, but it's also like an umbrella term that kind of covers all of that. So you find all different kinds of definitions of wisdom. When you look up the word wisdom in Hebrew, a lot of them are going to pinpoint that know-how, practical, expertise, skill, because that's really what the word specifically has to do with. But the biblical usage of it is much broader. So this is the best definition that I've come to about what wisdom is. Biblical understanding of wisdom. Wisdom is the quality of discerning what is true, what is ethically right, and what should be done in different situations. That's wisdom. Discerning what is true, what is ethically right, and what should be done in different situations. That takes discernment. You learn, there may be a right and a wrong, but sometimes it's just what's the best thing? What's the wisest thing to do in this particular situation? Now, that's a really good definition, a less good one, but one that sticks with you and has stuck with me. People will also often ask, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? And knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Okay, y'all knew that, right? Tomato is a fruit. But wisdom is knowing you don't put a tomato in a fruit salad. Okay, right? So there's a practical common sense approach to wisdom that says, I don't just know bare facts, but I know what to do with them. So that's kind of the concept of wisdom. It has to do with what is true, with ethics and practical good sense. Now, who's this wisdom for? Look at verse 4. This is the target audience. To give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. Okay, there's two groups there. The first is the simple, the youth. Simple, not meaning there's anything wrong with you, has to do with being naive, which again is no insult. It just means you lack experience, you lack knowledge, you lack good judgment, just from the lack of knowledge and experience and wisdom. It just comes with being young. I gave you an example this morning of my being naive. And even today, I would have to say, to a degree, I am naive. All of us lack some level of experience, and knowledge, and wisdom. And so, to youth, to those of you who are younger, lack experience, lack knowledge, lack good judgment, this book gives you prudence, knowledge, and discretion. It equips you, we might say, for smart living, for making good judgments. It's making you ready to live a wise and good life. Now, the other group is, did you notice it? The wise. Let the wise hear. The one who understands. Those of you who are not so naive. Those of you who are far more experienced and far more knowledgeable and have far more understanding, this is an opportunity for you to increase learning. This book is not just for the young and naive, it's for the old and wise too. There's always room to grow. And I love in there that it says the one who understands will obtain guidance. That's one of the things that you get at whatever point of the journey you are. You can be the wisest in the room, the most knowledgeable in the room, and yet you're probably facing something in life in which you need guidance. And that's what this wisdom is for, to obtain guidance. I found this interesting that the word guidance derives from the word for a ship's rope. So in that ancient world on sailor's ship, you use ropes every day for navigating that vessel. That's your main tool in navigating is a rope. So it has to do with guiding and leading the ship. And this book is about that. It's like this lead rope. It's this guiding rope that's giving you guidance for life. So this book is for all of us. The method and the motto we get in verses 6 and 7. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. So that's what we're going to be working with. That's the method of study. We're working with these proverbs, saying, words, riddles of the wise. The way that the whole book breaks down, it's really got three chunks to it. The first 9 chapters are more long poems rather than those short sayings, long poems that are really about the nature and importance of wisdom. The middle section, chapter 10 through 22, verse 16, is what we would think of as Proverbs proper. That's where we get those little one-verse sayings that we're so accustomed to. And then the last part of the book, chapters 22, 17 through 31, is a collection of collections. And that's where you get some other writers involved in there, and it has both short and long sayings. Most of what we're going to do is going to be dealing with those short one-verse sayings. That's what we're going to be wrestling with largely in here rather than the long poems. But that's the method. We're studying those kinds of things. And the motto for the book is verse 7. This is where we begin. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fear of God, that's where you start. Awe and reverence of God. You don't start with right information. You don't start with right methods. You start with right relationship. It's the relationship with God that's the most important thing. That's the very beginning of any pursuit of wisdom and a wise life as you begin with that relationship with God. I did my education at Lubbock Christian University, huge blessing in my life. And when you go to a Christian school, one of the non-negotiables is you You have chapel every day, and you have Bible classes that are mandatory. Whatever your major is, you got to have Bible classes. Obviously, not every university has that, but I appreciated that was a requirement for me because I got to learn and pursue at the same time something academic and something spiritual. And I think in my mind before that point, I had those separated out. You got your academic, your intellectual pursuit, your career, those sorts of things. Then you've got spiritual over here to the side. But it was during my time at LCU when my faith is really starting to become my own. Those spiritual pursuits are becoming the most important, that I realized how interwoven those are, and that it's actually the spiritual that's giving direction to the academic, the intellectual, the career, those kinds of things in life. So just a principle to take away from this, a deepening spiritual development gives meaning and direction to intellectual development. You got to put the spiritual part first. That gives meaning, purpose, direction to every other area of life. So that's where you start. Now, you notice in that verse, it talks about fools despise wisdom. That's giving you the flip side. To despise wisdom is to despise the Lord. To despise God is to already set out on a foolish course. You won't find wisdom apart from God. Okay, the value of wisdom. This is where we get to thinking about the why, the motivation. Why are you going to pursue it? Why go after it? Now, I want to read quite a bit. But again, don't let your blood pressure get up. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I'm going to read verses 1 through 15. Actually, the whole chapter in Hebrew is one sentence, so it's kind of hard to figure out where do you stop reading. But I want to read a big chunk of this and then make a few comments on it. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 1. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity, every good path, for wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will watch over you, understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech, who forsake the paths of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perseverance of evil, men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. Okay, so if you notice there's an if-then movement to that passage that we read. If you seek like treasure, wisdom, knowledge, all those things under the wisdom umbrella, then you will find this wisdom. If you search for it, you will find it from God. So there's this wisdom is presented as a treasure you ought to go after. It's to be pursued. This is your motivation. There are three things in here that are reasons why wisdom is something to pursue, why you should go after it like treasure. There's more we could pull out, but these are the three I'm going to draw out. Wisdom comes from God. You see it in verses 6 and 7 there. The Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. This is why in James it teaches us if you lack wisdom, then you ask God. It's from God that wisdom comes. Now, I've always thought in my mind, okay, wisdom comes from God, so if you want wisdom, then you ask God. But what struck me in studying it this time was you want wisdom because it comes from God. That's why you pursue it, because of who it comes from. If I could share with you an illustration, I don't know if this will connect or not, but I like to read, and I have my favorite authors. And sometimes those authors, as happens, will die. And there's no more books that they're going to write. And I feel sad that I'm not going to get that. Dallas Willard is one of those. I learned a lot from Dallas Willard. And when he died, I thought, man, I'm going to miss reading what he puts out. Well, after his death, somebody took his notes from a class that he did, and they put together a book, as happens sometimes with our favorite authors, that after they die, somebody will take their old material and publish a book. And so you'll get this treasure that you didn't know you were going to be able to get. And I'm ready to read it because of who it is. Like, that's Dallas Willard. Not that Dallas Willard's perfect, but I want to, I saw recently Flannery O'Connor. There's going to be a book published posthumously. That's a hard word to say, posthumously. One of her books is going to come out after she's dead. So, that's a classic writer. I want to read it just because of who it is. The reason you search for wisdom is because of who it comes from. It comes from God. There are all kinds of books you can read in the world, all kinds of information you could get. Why search Proverbs? Because it's wisdom from God. The words of the wise, inspired by the Holy Spirit, come from God. That's why you search for it, because God has revealed something, your Creator, that you need to know. So the motivation for getting into it is, I want to know this wisdom that comes from God. I love the way that this is put in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 11. The words of the wise, okay, all of these sayings like Proverbs and such, the words of the wise are like goads, it's cattle prod, get you moving. And like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness to the flesh. Amen. Right? Too many books, too much study, weariness to the flesh. What he's saying is there's all kinds of books with interesting, helpful things, but the words of the wise that you get in inspired Scripture are the words of one shepherd. You notice we capitalize it in English because it's saying this is wisdom from God, the one shepherd over all. So we apply ourselves to learning, to understanding wise sayings because of who the author is, God. It's wisdom from God. Second reason is because wisdom will be pleasant to your soul. That's in verse 10. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. It will be lovely. It will be delightful. You go after it because it's truly good. Not necessarily because you want it, but because it's good, and it will be pleasant, and will be delightful. If you get wisdom, you get something that your soul knows is good. Now, I'm going to, again, an illustration. I don't know if it's going to connect or not. Today at lunch, we had fresh green beans with pomegranate. Okay, now some of you are going, hey, that sounds kind of good. And some of you are looking at me like, would y'all try it? Maybe. Some of you just bold, right? Yeah. Green beans with pomegranates. I can tell you, when I was a kid, I would say, I don't think so. One of the things that my kids hear me say a lot is, you don't like it yet. Okay. When we are young, there are things we haven't quite discovered that are good. They're truly good for us, and they're lovely to taste. They're good. We just don't know it yet. We hadn't discovered it yet. And as we go along in life, we discover more and more what's really, really good. Wisdom holds that. There's all kinds of things today that you might think, this is what I want. This is what my appetite is for. And it may not be wisdom, but if you get wisdom, you'll find something that your soul craves and your soul recognizes this is good. It will truly be pleasant to your soul. Third reason is wisdom will guard your path. You see it especially verses 11 through 19, but also up in 7 and 8, that wisdom will be guarding you, delivering you from evil paths, crooked paths, dark paths, will be guarding you and delivering you from disaster. Now, I want to be real careful in how I say this because seeking wisdom, choosing wisdom, living wisely does not mean you will not have disaster in life. Disaster can come to you no matter how many wise choices you make. You can choose to pursue wisdom all your whole life and still disaster come to you. But there are some disasters that you will be saved from if you choose wisdom. And we see it all the time. We see how foolish living, foolish choices repeatedly ruin people's health, their family, their reputation, their career, even their soul, what their soul craves. It ruins it because we make choices that lead to consequences that are destructive. I'm navigated by that thing that tells me I want that, I go after that, and what does it do? It destroys my life. Choosing wisdom will save you from a lot of those disasters. I met a man several years back. It was actually at Kingdom's Kitchen. He was about my age, and we connected, just being kind of in the same age group. And I noticed his health started to seriously decline. Noticeably, something was wrong. Pretty soon, he was repeatedly getting checked into the hospital, and I went and saw him just a few days before he died. And he was pretty open, and he said, "Yeah, I'm here because of alcoholism." And he said, "When I was a teenager, that's what everybody was doing. Everybody said, 'Come on, it'll be fun.' And all these friends pulling me into it. And then I got addicted. I got stuck in that life, and it has totally destroyed me. And I would do anything to go back and choose differently again." And he said, "Here I am alone in a hospital room, and where are all my friends?" Man, wisdom saves you from a lot of disaster. It guards your path. I thought it was interesting, too, that it's not just wise choices. In verses 7 and 8, it talks about the Lord. The Lord is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. And I realize sometimes you choose the way of wisdom. You may not even, it may not be a conscious, I'm doing the wise thing. You may be in a place in your life where you don't know what's happening. You're as confused as you've ever been, but the Lord is with you, and he's working in your life. I heard it put this way by Tim Keller, and it really gave me a lot to think about. He said, God's guidance is more something God does than something God gives. Now, to be clear, God gives guidance. That's what the book of Proverbs is. He's giving us guidance, so we ought to listen, hear what he says. But he also does guidance. He's active. He's in our life. And for his saints, he's a part of leading them, like those ropes. He's leading your life. Sometimes you don't even see it. You're trying to make wise choices, but sometimes you just make decisions the best you know, and you don't know how it's going to work out. But God's involved in your life, being navigated even when you don't know it. So the point is, seek it, call out for it, choose it. Because of who it comes from, it'll save you from disaster. Now, this third heading, the path of wisdom, it's an illustration that's repeated, a metaphor. In chapters 1 and 2, it's repeated numerous times. Wisdom is referred to as a path, as a road, as a way. So you've got good paths, and then you've got dark paths. You've got the paths of justice and righteousness, the paths of the crooked, the dishonest, and evil. Verse 20 of chapter 2 is the point where it's kind of bringing this long poem to a conclusion. In some translations, it translates that word so to therefore. Because you ought to go after wisdom, because this is the worth and value of wisdom, this is the conclusion. So you will walk in the way of the good and keep to the paths of the righteous. Some translations even put it a little clearer, I think. So walk in the way of the good and keep to the paths of the righteous. It's saying because this is true, this is the conclusion you come to. This is what you decide to do. Walk in the way of the good, the path of the good. It involves a couple of things. One is a choice. If it's a path, you got to make a choice. You don't drift into a wise life. You decide, I'm going to choose the good path. I'm going to choose the good ways. I'm going to choose wisdom. Chapter 1, verse 20 presents wisdom calling out in the streets. And the book is saying, listen and choose wisdom over folly. Be smart. Choose wisdom. So if wisdom is a path, number one, it means choose wisdom. Choose that path. But secondly, it's you got to choose a habit. Because walking in Scripture is a metaphor for living. It's not a one-time decision. It's what you do throughout your life. It's a long, steady practice of discipline, training. Remember, instruction, it's not just directions on how to do it. It's training. This is the way you live. Training, discipline forms character over the long run. Repeatedly choosing wisdom, repeatedly searching and digging for it, repeatedly practicing it forms a wise person. So you're choosing it. I'm going to choose wisdom, but then I'm going to make a habit out of living it. If you'll bear with one more illustration. I can't help it. Yeah, I saw this the other day, and it really stuck with me. Okay, now, yeah, I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm excited for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Okay, I like Patrick Mahomes too. But I like in that video, you see what he does naturally on the field is what he's been training for. What he's done repeatedly over and over again happens naturally in the moment without thinking about it. That's the way training works. When you choose a habit of, I'm going to walk the wise path, I'm going to do the wise things, you become the person who does by nature the wise thing. Your character is developed in that way. So those of you who are young, there's nothing wrong with being naive. That is part of being young. But you ought to be on the path to wisdom, choosing it and practicing the way of the wise. Choose it now. You'll never regret it later in life. I told you there's 4 headings. I have to do this one, but I will be very brief. We got to talk about the foolishness of wisdom. And I know that makes you scratch your head a little bit and say, I thought those were 2 separate things. Okay. We read Proverbs along with the whole canon of God's revealed word. And if we just read Proverbs alone and we don't consider what else is in the Bible, we run the risk of making the pursuit and practice of wisdom something that, I've got to be good enough. I've got to be that kind of person. Or it becomes a source of pride, of self-righteousness, like we talked about today. I'm a wise person. I've developed in wisdom. So Paul writes, in a culture that loved wisdom, and what we see in our wider world is there's some areas of overlap where the world appreciates and respects some level of things that we would call wisdom. Some of the things that the Bible says, the world would say, yeah, that's wise. There's some overlap. Well, Paul writes, in a world that values some level of wisdom, that would probably agree with a lot of Proverbs, and he says something really crucial, really important that we can't lose. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 21. For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. Okay, as with anything Paul writes, you got to chew on it a while. Let me make a couple of things clear. Wisdom is good. God is wise. He gives wisdom. We do well to take it to heart. The wider world will agree with us on some things that the Bible calls wisdom, but the world will diverge from us at the most crucial place, and it's at the cross of Christ. That's why he says this wisdom of God, which is the cross of Christ, Christ crucified, is perceived as folly by the world. So he talks about the folly of what we preach, the foolishness of wisdom. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm going to try to make it as clear as I can. The most important wisdom is the message of Christ crucified. You can't lose sight of that in your study or your search of any kind of wisdom. You've got to see what Christ has done for you. You pursue wisdom and you do well to pursue it, but you can't ever lose sight of what Christ has done for you. Don't let the cross out of focus. It is not what you do and how good you are, or how wise you are, or how good a life you live. It's what Christ has done for you. That is the wisdom and the power of God. If you let that out of focus, your default app will be, I've got to be good enough. So you can't let the cross out of focus. The other thing is, don't be ashamed to talk about the cross, to talk about Jesus, to talk about salvation. Sometimes as Christians, I think we feel a little bit embarrassed to bring it up. It doesn't have the dignified ring of wisdom. There's some things from Scripture we could talk about that anybody in the world would say, yeah, I'm with you there, that's common sense. But you talk about Jesus and the cross, it feels a little bit embarrassing. And that's why Paul is saying that is the wisdom of God. It's perceived as folly, but that's the message. That is the wisdom of God. And so what we take in and what we proclaim, cross has got to be central to that. That is the most important piece of wisdom, Christ crucified. Okay, I'm going to have to work on this. I went over. My apologies to you. If there's anything we can do for you tonight, something is on your heart, you want to put your faith in Jesus, I went over, but I'm sure we are not in a hurry. If there's a need on your heart or you want to be baptized tonight, we'd love to help you. Please stand and sing.